Hello and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Historical Humans podcast. This week we've got quite a special episode. We noticed that the James Webb Telescope started producing some wonderful images, so we figured let's really start peeling it back, and we're going to talk about one of the most well-known astronomers, Copernicus, who really left quite the legacy that we still see an impact today. But before we go there, I think we should introduce everyone. We've got my fellow co-host, Coleman. Gwendolyn was unable to join us today, so we ended up going down the bottomless barrel of facts, and we found Aaron Gilpin.
Yeah.
And
As my boss once put it, I know lots of useless information.
So who better to help us out on a podcast than another white male? And on that note, my name is Justin Woods, and Colum, do you just want to just jump right in? Let's just go for it.
Sure. So Nicolaus Copernicus, he was a Polish astronomer, mathematician, cleric, doctor, diplomat, economist. He did sort of everything in the late 15th and early 16th centuries. He was born in the city of Torun in Poland in 1473. And he changed his name from his native Polish Mikołaj Kopernik to Nicolaus Copernicus while he was at the University of Krakow at some point between 1492 and 1496. The reason he Latinized his name is because a lot of scientists to this day even use Latin as their common language. It was even more so back then than it was now, to the point where it was just easier for him to communicate with other intellectuals if he had a name that could be conjugated, relatively easily in Latin. So he goes from Copernic to Copernicus to give himself that ability to communicate easily.
Not just with education either, but also the fact that he was a cleric, he was a church official. The church almost predominantly used Latin up until this point, so it was almost essential to know it when you're studying the religion. So, I mean, there's a lot of good reasons for him to do it, and of course, the one thing the Romans sure loved to do was to incorporate other subgroups into their culture, so they like to spread their language and...
Yeah. Of course, the Romans have been dead for about 1,000 years by now.
Hey,
or a few hundred if you're counting the Byzantines.
We
do
yes.
count them.
They're the Holy
and I will
Roman
die
Empire.
on
They
this.
are Greeks.
Okay, hold on there. Holy Roman Empire. No, hold on.
No Holy Roman Empire, no Moscow. Maybe Byzantium is second to Rome.
They refer to themselves as Romans. Doesn't matter. They were Greek.
And they are wrong.
And this is the exact reason I was loving this.
No Rome, no Roman.
Well, they had Rome at one point again.
We have Rome at home.
Anyway.
Rome at home, it's just pasta and spaghetti.
Anyway, Copernicus, he had a lot of ties to the church growing up in his life. He was raised since the age of 10 by his mother's brother, his maternal uncle, the Bishop Prince of Warmia, which is a small Polish province in northern Poland. He was raised by the Bishop of Warmia since he was 10 years old. So he's got a lot of ties to the Catholic Church and to religion, and a lot of exposure to those ideas from a very young age. Just the ability to have access to education, the ideas of theology. So he's intimately familiar with the topics that he is going to begin questioning in his life as we go through university and move into his later years.
Wait, so there's something right there. So what you're telling me is when you know more about a topic, you begin to question your preconceived notions?
Yes, that's what happened with Copernicus. He had the unique combination of a deeply religious a religiously educated household. This wasn't just a religious community. This was he's raised by someone who can actually read the scriptures. and he's given the opportunity to study a lot, very intensively, a lot of mathematics and a lot of scientific principles at a lot of very early universities. The first universities haven't really been around for too long. Most of them are maybe a century or two old at this point at best for European education. So higher education is this new thing in Europe at this time.
Not to mention the fact that the Bible hasn't even been translated into all languages at that point, because for the most part, it's still Latinized. So
that is still technically heresy at this time. It is sacrilege to denounce the tongue of heaven and translate the Bible into any language other than Latin. This is, of course, ignoring the fact that the first part of the Bible would have been written in Hebrew
or Aramaic, depending.
Yeah, but it's Latin. At this point, is the only language available. So we have a combination of very well-educated, very in-depth religious upbringing with still a very religious life that is coupled to this higher education, because he goes to 4 universities for like 10 years.
I will say also too, before we move too far beyond it, at this point in time, it was also exceptionally common for the majority of education to be centered around a religious beginning or upbringing. Like, most well-educated people around this time were usually the people who were well entrenched in the religion. And to even your point about it being in Latin, a lot of the copies were done by monks in monasteries because they were some of the only people who could actually read and write.
Yeah, like we said, higher education in the form of like universities and things like that are very new to Europe. It's this secularization of literacy is what is sort of happening in Copernicus's time.
So this man also decided that he was going to take the Pokemon route and attend every university possible.
More or less.
I mean, why not? What else is he going to do with his life?
I will travel across the land, learning far and wide.
He starts off pretty normally. At the age of 19, he goes to the University of Krakow in Poland, starting at 1492, and he stays there for a 4-year term. So this is, very similar to a lot of higher education degrees today. 4 years, bachelor's kind of idea.
He did better than I did.
Yeah.
He's in university while Christopher Columbus is sailing across the Atlantic.
Yeah, basically, Christopher Columbus sails across the Atlantic. Nicholas Copernicus goes to college.
Wow, and I thought our college experience was during a historical time period.
Yep. One of the favorite things I came across is, so he was sent there to become a canon, which is a expert in the laws of the Catholic Church. A canon is a semi-secular position within the priesthood of the Catholic Church, whose job is centered around managing money and internal affairs. That's all I have to say about that.
All right, Forrest.
I have no intention of getting excommunicated by the single most conservative diocese of the entire freaking church.
That's fair.
I'm done. We live outside St. Louis.
Okay, so while he was at school, he studied primarily astronomy, astrology, studied both Greek and Islamic astronomy, which is really cool. And then it was also during this point that he did the Latinization because of the academics.
He also studied mathematics while he was there on as what was supposed to be his main thing, but he spent most of his time studying liberal arts, which at that time included astronomy, because astronomy and astrology were considered sister subjects, and more or less, you end up studying one, you're studying both.
So he could tell you your horoscope while also telling you whether Mercury is in retrograde.
Yeah, basically, because a big job at this time would be cities would have local astrologers whose job was to look at the sky and interpret omens for the city, on which policy decisions would be made, such as going to war, making peace, raising taxes, buying grain.
This sounds very familiar to me.
Mhm.
Almost as if they're taking some sort of old pagan tradition similar to the auguries.
Uh-oh.
Basically, except instead of using birds, we use exclusively the stars.
Now, just imagine if that same practice was tried to be implemented today, like how many riots there would be. Ah, yes, we consulted the stars, and the stars said we need to raise taxes by 2.2%.
Oh, they wouldn't do it for taxes. They just do it for the stock market.
Yeah.
And now I'm a billionaire.
I mean, it's more accurate than what they're doing now. Let's face it.
You got a hodl.
But honestly, it sounds more heretical considering they would devolve, or well, I shouldn't say devolve, but more of like they would try this considering, the church is very much against superstitions like that.
Well, the church is, well, see, here's the beautiful thing. The heavens have an exception to a lot of these rules, whereas like things like augury with birds did not, because the heavens in the church doctrine is a series of perfect celestial spheres in orbit around the earth, the center of all creation and the universe, God's masterpiece. And so the heavens being essentially the domain of God as viewed from earth were considered perfect and holy and pure. And thus interpreting them was more taking signals from God and the heavenly host about what you should do, rather than sacrificing to a magpie to tell you whether or not you should sow your field this week.
I mean, it's a lot cleaner than trying to read the liver of a chicken.
What just happened with tea leaves? I mean, seriously. Why can't we just read tea leaves?
I mean, I'm always down for reading.
That's a bit more of an Eastern tradition for Europe.
Yeah, but Europe likes to borrow traditions from the Far East and claim it as their own.
Well, usually they just take it.
Yeah.
Or trade it for opium.
Listen, that's later. That's later. This is before that. This is at the point in time where the best thing they've stolen so far is gunpowder.
Okay, that's fair. Still from the Far East, though.
Yeah.
Well, they got through the Ottomans, so the Ottomans took it first.
We don't talk about that.
Coffee. Yeah, and coffee. But anyway, so after the University of Krakow, Copernicus does what most wealthy Poles did at that time. He moves to Italy, and he attends a secondary school at the University of Bologna.
Bologna.
Yeah, where he is sent to study medicine and law, primarily medicine, I believe. At Bologna, he will continue on for an intensive study of law at the University of Padua, which, along with Bologna, is among the earliest institutions for higher education founded in Europe. They are among the first.
Interesting, but I think he also skipped over an important point while he was in Bologna.
I did that intentionally.
You wanted to talk about his roommate quite intimately.
Yeah. This guy, we can go in very much in depth about this person.
Roommates.
Yep. So, while he's at Bologna, he decides he's going to shack up with his astronomy teacher, Domenico Maria di Novara.
Oh boy!
Who is the chief astronomer of the University of Bologna?
Oh no!
He's basically living in his department head's house.
A tale as old as time.
I hope not. Honestly,
You know,
it probably wasn't.
I know.
It probably wasn't.
But they were roommates in a historical context. They couldn't have been anything more.
It probably.
I don't know if I like this kind of roommate situation.
And so, one of my Domenico here, Novara, he's one of my favorite people because he doesn't really get a lot of credit and a lot of footnotes, but he is basically the reason why Copernicus becomes such a problematic canon in the Catholic Church.
Oh, really? Why?
Because what he does is one of the things that Novara hates is astrology. He hates it.
I mean, that's fair.
He hates it with a passion, and so he is one of the first time Copernicus is really exposed to a well thought out, well educated authority figure able to articulate why shit that people have at this time isn't working and is a stupid idea.
I figured it was just because he was a Sagittarius.
And no, and this sort of sticks with him in a large part because Navarra, as a professional astronomer, has mathematical proof that if we are in a geocentric universe with the Earth at the center and everything revolving around it, and even with little mini circle of ellipses for all the other celestial bodies affecting their perfectly spherical motions, the astrology does not match the projected movements. It does not follow the mathematical patterns that have been laid forth.
Yeah, isn't it like because the whole theory is that everything revolves around the Earth, but I think it's like Mars or Venus, where Mars actually like moves like this in the sky and then kind of like circles around that way.
Yeah, basically Mars will lap Venus, and that should not be physically possible with the Earth at the center.
Yeah,
because it's doing and it's doing a lot of things that shouldn't happen, and so he's been tracking these signs, and he goes and he teaches Copernicus, one, they don't really mean anything, but I have to interpret them, and two, mathematically, they should not be happening the way they are. Okay. And this gives oh yes, here we go.
Well, no, the points you're making are complete and valid, but do you guys know the math that goes into figuring that stuff out? Because it's not easy math, and it's not something you could do purely based on observation.
And they didn't have a calculator either.
Yeah, no, it is very complicated math. The calculations for the rotations plus the epicycles, that's the word I'm trying to find, plus the epicycles for each individual celestial body is massive. This math is the result of decades of work by numerous scientists who still get it horribly wrong. Like, it will match the projections for a couple of months, and then it will stop working.
I took one astronomy class because I thought it'd be cool. I thought it'd be learning about the stars, learning about the composition of the planets.
It is.
And it was like a Calc 3 class. It is high in calculus plus graduate level physics equals astronomy. I took it at my community college, and I didn't have either of those classes at a college level, and I was lost, but it was also really cool.
Yeah, so
that's why I did physical science instead.
Yeah, that is one of the things also that helps keep Copernicus out of trouble for later challenging a lot of these notions, is the fact that the mathematics is such a major gatekeep that most people don't really understand what's going on and thus can't attack him for it.
So like other church members are just like, that's a bunch of numbers.
Yeah, he wrote a book, and in the intro to the book, what he says is astronomy, and he says mathematics should be left to the mathematicians. He basically says everyone else leave. This is postdoctorate level mathematics. No one else can understand a word that you're about to hear, and he is right. I have read what he wrote.
I am still honestly stuck at just the complexity of the equations, because like it really is higher level things, and the crazy thing is physics wasn't invented at this point. Calculus wasn't invented. We didn't know the effects of gravity, and they were sitting there trying to do the math of gravity in space. Yeah,
and one of the big things with this too is the mathematics that they had at the time when this system came out, when the geocentric system was invented, was in the 2nd century CE by a man named Claudius Ptolemaeus, who the most advanced mathematics he really had was geometry and trigonometry. There isn't really calculus at this point. The numbers haven't gotten that big. There's not calculus in the way we understand calculus. And it's, so we are attempting to use geometry to understand calculus in space.
Hey, Copernicus, can I borrow your abacus, please?
Yep. And because the system has been around for such a long time, the church naturally endorses it as God's plan. And when you've endorsed something for over 1,000 years, it becomes kind of hard to say you were wrong.
Yeah.
Which is going to cause so many problems for Copernicus after Navarra sets him off down this course. Because after living with Navarra, after going to the University of Bologna, he becomes very inquisitive and begins really diving into astronomy, which is his favorite subject, with a much more critical eye than just, hey, I'm here to learn. He's not 19 anymore. He's not a kid. He's got his 4-year semi-doctorate at this point.
So he's no longer bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. He's bitter and coming in with a plan, and is just, he's a man on a mission.
I don't think he's ever really God. He's never necessarily bitter, Mr. Blues. But I don't think he's ever really too bitter, but he does have a lot of worries that affect his work, especially later on in his life.
I mean, this is also a time period where that essentially sets off a whole series of change. I mean, not just globally with the discovery of the New World, but also with a bunch of scientific and social changes.
Yeah,
I mean,
and
it really kind of just starts with Copernicus, really.
Yeah. Copernicus starts it off. Copernicus is the first of was essentially the big four for explaining heliocentrism, because it goes Copernicus, followed by Galileo and Kepler, and then they are succeeded by Newton, who manages to solve what is up to that point the mystery of gravity, for the most part, which is the force that most fucks up everything that Copernicus tries to do.
Again, I always circle back to that astronomy class because it just made me think about all of that, because we had to take into account the gravitational pull, and we also, our teacher was really sadistic, so he made us look at binary star systems. And we had to try and figure that out.
No,
that's not fun. Yeah. Yeah. But yeah,
19 years old trying to figure that out.
Yep.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So what does he do after that?
So after Bologna, he goes to the University of Padua, where he studies law. Padua was a very big university for its time. It was very well renowned. It is effectively original Ivy League material kind of deal, where he studies law, and then in 1503 at the University of Ferrara he receives his doctorate in canon law, which is again the laws of the Catholic Church. So he understands perfectly well how to the mathematics and astronomy behind how the universe works, and exactly where this is going to bump up against the most powerful institution of his time, because the Reformation and the Protestant Reformation, it started, but the Catholic Church is still the most dominant non-secular institution on the planet.
Anyways, at this point, was it the early form of Lutherans? They're just essentially heretics, no different than the Cathars or Francelli.
Yeah, I think over the course of his life, you get Lutherans and Calvinists, and that's about as far as the Protestant Revolution gets. It's mostly limited to Germany and the Low Countries, with some moves into France.
Well, don't forget Scandinavia; they took to it pretty well too.
Yeah, Scandinavia's but again, this is very early on. It's not. This is pre-internet, pre-railroads, pre any major form of travel and communication. Things are traveling slowly. So he would have been aware of it being a canon in Poland, but he would not have been in its effects. He's not in the splash zone while he's alive.
Wait, hold on. I'm getting a text message. It's from Martin Luther.
Yeah, he says we should join forces.
Yeah, he just tweeted about. He's like, "Lol, just nailed my thesis to the door of the church."
Yeah.
OMG, that is so badass.
Yeah. So after his 11 years of university,
Casual rookie numbers.
yeah, he returns to Poland and he serves as a church administrator and a doctor. He lives for the most part in a small tower in a monastery where he can observe, which he turns into his own little observatory, where he spends most of his time studying astronomy when, his work life doesn't get in the way.
That's honestly like the dream, though. You get your own tower, you just get to study the stars.
Yep.
And I wish I could be like that. I could be rich like that, to just stare at the sky all day and not have any worries.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he does it all without the use of a telescope.
My man must have been eating the helicarrots.
This man is this man studies the stars by putting what is essentially a lead pipe to his eye to block out excess light.
I mean, that's not a bad idea.
It's the earliest idea of, hey, there's a tube. Maybe we should take these glasses things and put them in the tube.
I mean, it's also like light pollution isn't what it is today too. Yeah. So,
but at the same time too, you're trying to look at a single object in the sky. So
I don't know. Krakow's a pretty big city. Krakow's got a lot of people. There's skyscrapers.
He's not in Krakow. He went to the University of Krakow. He's back in Warmia. He's in this small, semi-independent Polish province.
Oh, okay.
Where his uncle is again the Prince Bishop. So effectively, he's living in his uncle's mini kingdom.
Classic nepotism. You got to know a guy.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like that's academia either.
Yeah. It's funny you should mention academia, because between his uncle's prominence within the church and his skill as an astronomer, by 1514, he is consulted to work on another project that we've talked about here on Historical Humans. Copernicus is one of the leading astronomers in designing the Gregorian calendar.
Which, shameless plug, if you guys want to check out our podcast that we did about the time and about calendars, the link will be in the description.
I watched that one. That was fun.
It was a great time.
As a viewer and now a special co-host.
Yep.
He is.
That was a pretty good seal of approval.
Yeah, so leap years every fourth year except for a year that ends in 00. That's him. That's this man right here. That is one of his contributions to society.
So, just for those playing at home, can you give us a 2-minute rundown as to why we needed to switch?
Yeah, sure. So the original calendar had a static leap year that occurred every 4 years regardless. This worked for the most part, but the calendar was some 1,500 years old at this point. And the rotation of the Earth, approximately worked. It was off by just enough where you would lose a day every couple years. And by this point, things had shifted to where you had lost about 2-3 months. So if you were on the Gregorian, if you're on the Julian calendar before it becomes the Gregorian calendar, you are celebrating Christmas in February or March, I believe, as opposed to December.
Speaking of which, it's funny enough. We think it took a long time for the adoption of the Gregorian calendar to be fully accepted. Yeah. Funny enough, so that during one of the early Olympics, Russia's team was late by 10 days to the games because they were still using the Julian calendar.
That actually expands even further. I did a TikTok and a YouTube short based on a similar phenomenon. When the United States purchased Alaska from Russia, the residents of Alaska had about 2 weeks of the year where it just didn't exist. Because when they made the switch over the calendars, it just jumped dates. So they completely lost like 2 weeks. That just never existed in Alaska.
Yeah, it's there's effectively this loss of time, and it's kind of screwing with like the order things should be in, because things are starting to happen at noticeably the wrong season. It's off by just enough to start causing issues for things like farmers and just cause general confusion among people.
This isn't the first time that a group has had to change calendars. I mean, you see it happen in other calendars and for other civilizations, most notably in the Middle East with Babylon.
Yeah, the solar calendar requires some steady upkeep, because it requires that the year be the same length every year, as opposed to a lot of lunar calendars, which can be a little bit more variable.
Spoiler
and that's
alert,
still a
the
lot
dates aren't
of
the same.
But even then, like, that's still like some intense mathematics that go back millennia, and to this day we're still using the same calendar. So
yeah, and it also speaks a great deal to Copernicus' skill and reputation in his own lifetime, that the Catholic Church would, when combing through the ranks for people intelligent enough to solve the problem that Pope Gregory has presented them with, go all the way out to Poland to consult with this man living in a little tower in a minor convent of a relatively small diocese.
So what you're saying is they went, we need to speak with the Polish hermit.
He wasn't necessarily a hermit, but he was definitely in a small potatoes congregation. He had only taken orders as a canon, which means that he did not take a vow of celibacy. He did not take robes as a priest. He was a canon. This is the minimum indoctrination required to work for the Catholic Church, is what he had.
I think it's funny that, like, I just like imagine Pope Gregory's like, guys, we need a new calendar. We need someone who's really smart. And some guys like, yeah, this guy Copernicus, he does some weird math, so he's clearly smart. Where's he at? Poland.
It's like he's studied all this stuff for himself.
I seriously want to know how that selection committee went. Like, did they just have a huge document of like, all right, we have 100 people who attended university because the year is 1514.
Yep, they would have. Italy had a bit of a monopoly on education, especially doctoral level education. So what they would have is they would have easy access as the Catholic Church based in Rome, Italy. Yeah. Easy access to a lot of records. They would also probably would have had records and qualifications for various members of their church copied in the capital city of Rome, so that they know who they have where, and they would have probably combed through this very labor-intensive process and tried to find anyone who had studied astronomy and had sufficient credentials to back up consultation. And then they would have gone around sending letters to all these different congregations asking, hey, is this person still alive? We need him.
So there was
and they die of the plague, or is he still alive? We're like the papal inquiry.
This is a process that takes several years. This is It was all done by hand. It is a pain, just even to begin with. There's a reason why the Catholic Church employed literal armies of literate monks. Like, your whole job is to read, write, and find things. This is your life. Here's this tiny room where you dig through archives until you die.
So
also, you're not allowed to marry. Have fun.
You won't have time for marriage with all the cross-referencing you have to do.
You know, I really hate it because I see a lot of flashes to my life of working in the archives. The amount of times I've spent in the stacks, like, with just aisles and aisles stacked as high as the eye can see, full of old documents and books, and then having to find the one token item you are looking for. I cannot imagine without any sort of reference guides.
Yeah.
I had a little
There's-
bit of a taste of that in the Latin archives in Orvieto, and we were just trying to find any sort of reference to like our site, and like we're just combing through it, just because we not only do we have the actual book, we have books that catalog the information. Of course, this information is all in Italian, and then I just remember going through all of it, just trying to find any information, and then we found a few. But it's in the book that's under restoration.
Oh.
So we're just like, we found something, but we can't see it.
Mhm. Yeah.
And that took 2 hours by itself. And we were there for 3 hours just trying to like comb through any little tidbit that might just say something. It's all like administrative land ownership too.
Yeah.
What we're trying
Now
to say.
imagine doing that, but immediately next door there are the catacombs and/or ossuary where they interred your predecessor about a week prior.
Yeah. Hey, we got a spot for you right there next to him.
Now, my question is that in the same dungeon as like the rest of the like cells and other places that you keep political prisoners, or is that in a different part of the cave system?
This is a church; they don't have that. They convict you of heresy in open courts. That's the policy. There's not. This isn't Venice,
It's not too far from Venice, though.
but it's not Venice.
I mean, they did pull out a pope once out of the grave to put him on trial.
I don't know where you guys have gone with this, but anyway, Copernicus, everybody. So Copernicus carries on for about another 30 years until he dies in Fromberg, Poland in 1543. This is the same year that he publishes his major work. This is the book that he is renowned for. It's the reason why we're talking about him today. On the Revolutions of the Heavenly Spheres, where he lays out his main theory of that the sun doesn't revolve around the earth revolves around the sun. And it is only because he is dead that he really doesn't have the church go after him at this point.
Which is kind of impressive.
Yeah.
You know, all things considered, because the Catholic Church wasn't one to pull punches.
I mean, in retrospect, this is just in the grand scheme of things. When you look at it from their, kind of his perspective, yeah, he might have written stuff that would have been considered heretical, but he was also only really known in the Catholic Church. So it's not like some random dude in Paris, France, would have known about Copernicus.
The two big things that save him is he is writing mathematics for mathematicians. So it already takes a PhD in math to understand what he's saying. And he's dead. So you can't really do much to hold him accountable for saying things that go against, the established church doctrine, which the church was very adamant about not backing down from.
Yeah.
So the most they could really do is say, yeah, this is Copernicus. He had his theory. He was wrong. It was he made a mistake. And they sort of leave it at that for the most part.
Which is pretty easy, considering he was dead and nobody else really knew him.
Yeah, it was like, we're not going to protest over much.
It's interesting too, because he had it written by 1530, and granted, there were a lot of things he needed to work through to finalize it and to basically get it ready for publication. But I definitely wonder how much of it was him holding on to it until his death before publication.
Yeah, he definitely holds on to it to his death. There's definitely a fear of the church. There are several issues that he has that he also keeps holding out, trying to resolve with the math that he performs. Because again, this is a man attempting to perform high-end calculus with nothing but an abacus and a tube. So he is really at a technological disadvantage for what he needs to correctly deduce his theory. So I guess we'll go into the issues, and we'll go into a little bit of what he brings out in this. So his first issue was that there is an assumption that the heavens are perfect and thus everything in the heavens must move in a series of perfect spheres because God created them and God would not make the heaven itself imperfect. This is untrue. And so when he makes his model, Copernicus continues with this perfect sphere, but the planets, their orbits are elliptical, which means they are egg-shaped. They're oval-looking. They're not perfect spheres, which means he has things showing up in places that they shouldn't. And mathematically, he can't figure out why, because he can't really shake this assumption that it's heaven. Everything there must be perfect. Have a lot of problem with that one.
I mean, that's a perfect example of like biases influencing thought.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's something we seem to circle around to every single episode.
Yeah.
Hey man, it's anthropology.
Yeah.
What do you expect?
Yeah. His second big mistake was when he moved the center of the Earth was supposed to be the center of the universe and the solar system. When he moves it to the sun, he assumes that the sun is the center of the universe rather than just the center of the solar system. And this causes some funky things to happen with his maths, because with the sun at the center of the solar system, he can't account for the gravitational pull of the entirety of the Milky Way going any direction other than towards the sun, which it does not go. We are in a tangle arm of a spiral galaxy, so we are pretty far from the center of anything. So again, gravity looks off. His math isn't perfectly working. There are still problems. And it's those types of problems that really made him hate geocentrism and the Ptolemaic system. And he's kind of annoyed that he can't solve these.
I mean, I definitely understand that. Like, if you're on the verge of this breakthrough and you definitely know you're onto something, but you just can't quite get it perfect, how aggravating would that be?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And his final thing, and this is the one that really kills him because he's not studying gravity directly. And gravity really screws him over because there is the scientific principle in his lifetime. It is untrue. It's later disproven. But the principle is that things fall to Earth because gravity is the force pulling everything towards the center of the universe. And gravity can only pull one direction. So gravity is not based on mass. It is based on having a little 0, 0 geolocator dot at the center of the universe. And that's why it goes down. So if the center of the universe is not Earth, why is it when I pick up, any random object and let it go, it falls towards the Earth? He cannot solve that because he's not studying gravity directly. He's looking at indirect effects, and he doesn't quite understand that it's mass and not, the position you are in.
Which we got to keep in mind for the time period and the era. That is a pretty logical train of thought to come to.
Yes, this is 200 years before Newton figures it out. So there is very basic logic here.
I mean,
even then when Newton comes around with these ideas, it's bare bones compared to what we know now.
Oh yeah, definitely. And so with these problems, even with all these problems, Copernicus is able to perform several key feats. One of which is he's able to, for the first time, correctly order the planets in the solar system by distance to the sun. He's able to correctly order them because, like we said before in the Ptolemaic system with Mars passing around Venus and things like that, people were confused as to which side Mercury, Mars, and Venus were all on. Were they closer to the sun? Were they further from the sun? People couldn't tell because they were and weren't at different points, according to the geocentric model.
Also, not to mention the fact that Venus has a retrograde orbit versus our standard normal grade. So, there were some issues and some hiccups that would lead to some questionable thought.
Yep. Yeah, he is also able to correctly guess, or at least estimate, the orbital period of each planet without a telescope. He gets it about as right as you can without a telescope. It is as near perfect as you can be. This man solved the calendar. So he then decides apparently to solve the calendar of every other planet he can find.
I solved one calendar. Now I'm going to solve space.
Yeah.
He's like, I got the calendar of Earth figured out, but now I'm going to go for Mars.
Yep. Yep. He then establishes the axis of the Earth. The idea that the Earth is tilted to a set degree and then spins on this axis to create seasons. And it's as we turn on this tilt around the sun that it gets warmer and then colder and then warmer again.
This is just one man. This is one man.
It's a 6-volume work, and in it he solves weather.
Big brain.
Well, I mean, I guess it's probably not just one man, but like,
Yeah. Oh, it is him. It is one man in a tower.
I mean, like,
he is not surrounded by high-level mathematicians.
I was always just thinking, maybe it's like, some professors take the works of undergrads because they legally don't have to, credit them. Yeah. I was thinking that kind of situation, but this is literally just one man just staring up at the sky all day.
Yeah, no, he's not Da Vinci.
This is effectively 31 years of high-end mathematics and stargazing.
Like, it's like he was just like, yes, I figured out calendars. Now I'm gonna figure out the seasons.
Yep.
The Catholic Church is over here just like, please just stop, sir.
Please.
This is a Wendy's.
Oh,
no. Everyone's just looking back and going, what did you do? What did you do?
I figured out the seasons, guys. Like, more blasphemy.
Yep. And finally,
more math we have to learn.
Yeah, and finally, I come to his biggest thing, which is the heliocentric theory of the universe, which all these other discoveries sort of touch on or are based off of, which is the Earth revolves around the sun. And this is the first time a modern European scientist ever proposes that theory. That theory did have proponents several thousand years prior, but it kind of gets washed away. There's not really any math to prove it. Because, again, the mathematics that people are working with in what is effectively ancient Greece and ancient Rome is geometry. And geometry works a little bit better with having the Earth at the center on a 2D model than having the sun at the center. It doesn't work in actual practice, but that's the math they had.
Yeah, but they like the aesthetic of the 2D model.
Yeah, it's the first modern European scientist to do this, and it works out pretty well for him.
Now, I know he dies and he avoids the ire, but now, what does this challenge, how does that impact the Catholic Church?
So,
how do they take it?
So the issue the Catholic Church has is that they have endorsed Ptolemaic theory, they have endorsed the Ptolemaic theory of geocentrism for about 1,200 years at this point. They are not ones to admit they are wrong or that they have been wrong for such a long period of time. This is a point at which the Catholic Church is facing increased scrutiny and criticism. And so admitting that you could be so wrong about something so fundamental to God's creation and God didn't come down and correct you on it, seeing as how you have a man sitting in a chair who is supposed to be the voice of God and to have the angels come whisper to him the truths of reality. This is a very bad look for the church if this comes out. They're already being questioned. They're already feeling like they're under threat. And they do not want to lose power. So they just kind of quietly shut it down. They say Copernicus was wrong. He had this theory. He was a brilliant mathematician. He tried something new. That's great. He was wrong. And it's kind of heretical if you think about it.
There's like, everybody makes mistakes. Everybody has those days.
Okay, Miley, calm down. You do not use that holy language in my household.
Here's the thing. Most other mathematicians for the next 100 years disagree with Copernicus and think he is wrong. And they say, this doesn't work. Look at gravity. Look at you know, look at how the sun is look at how the sun isn't quite matching all this gravitational pull. Look at how the orbits don't perfectly match up in your little circles. Now,
I know the
granted,
answer to this.
yeah, it's the ellipticals. Now, granted, this is far less complicated math than the constantly refining series of epicycles that geocentrism requires. It's still absurdly complicated, and for it to be wrong even slightly is a big deal.
Yeah, it's one of those like the famous saying, close only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades. This is pretty darn close, and
Yeah.
I'd say that this counts pretty well.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
seeing and speaking of close, prior to On the Heavenly Spheres, Copernicus does have one other work. It's a minor manifesto that he writes. It's a little like pamphlet almost, called the Commentariolus, which is the little commentary. And he wrote this leading up to his work on the Gregorian calendar. So 1508 to 1514 is when he writes this, and it's his. It's not published while he's alive, but it's his earliest model for the Earth revolving around the sun. He's working on this at about the time when he's being asked by the Catholic Church to fix the calendar. And so he's looking at how seasons work, at how everything moves in the sky, how to make this all match up so that everything does the same thing at the same time of year.
Interesting.
And he kind of begins down this path. It's a little commentary. He never publishes it. But we find it after his death, and it's the proto version of his On the Heavenly Spheres. It's his little beginning. And you want close enough, that's right there.
But I mean, like most good academics and like most good scientists, history really does favor Copernicus, because while his contemporaries and while a lot of his successors dismissed his thoughts and his ideas, later on he was vindicated, and even more vindicated. Like, ironically, he had other people take the fall for him on his behalf. But
they don't take the fall on his behalf. They take the fall for being alive while refining his theories, because about 100 years after him, or I guess in the century after him, because it's starting in the he dies in the 16th century, mid 16th, and the early 17th century, other people start taking up the mantle that Copernicus left behind. Yeah. They really do start.
I mean, I just feel like it'd be cool if Copernicus could see the tools that we as like a species use now to see space, and he would just be like, I was just using a tube staring at the sky, guys. Like, what?
I think
he would freak out for Hubble, not the least of which is like, so is it like tied by a rope up there?
No.
Yeah, like how'd you get
it back down?
Is it like a giant balloon?
I imagine there would be a mix between shock and awe of like, oh my god, this is so cool, like you can actually see these images, and then also just pure unadulterated anger, like, what the fuck, I had to just do this by eye, and you have all of these tools, you were able to just see it?
But then he's also like, but I was right. It's like, suck it, Pope.
Yeah.
Speaking of the fall, guys.
So the two people who come after him, they sort of revise and refine his theory and help kind of work out some of the things in it, like the ellipses, like the center of the universe, start kind of separating out the various problems that Copernicus is having. And they are Galileo Galilei of Italy and Johannes Kepler of Germany. And yes, I'm using the modern states terms for where they are rather than dealing with the exact freaking ever-changing provinces of these landscapes during this time period.
You don't want to be Roman Empire. It's pretty complicated.
You don't want to be politically correct based on these sovereign nation states?
Go to hell.
Ex-sovereign nation states.
Yeah. So Kepler is able to escape the church despite publishing many works that are heliocentric, that do go against the doctrine, because he is living in what is now Germany, and a large part of Germany is very strongly Protestant at this time, so he's kind of just out of their reach. Galileo, however, is in Italy, which is the stronghold. And I mean the stronghold for Catholicism, and has been for since Catholicism was a thing. He gets tried for heresy and under heavy torture is convicted and issues a recantation denouncing his work on heliocentrism. He is later pardoned several centuries later, but he is tortured into saying he was wrong, which is what the church probably would have done to Copernicus if Copernicus hadn't died the same year he published.
Yeah.
Which seems to have been intentional on his part.
Look, I've seen enough. To the grave.
Figured it out. So yeah, you could assume he was smart enough to know, hey, maybe I don't want this to get out while I'm alive.
Yeah. Well, Copernicus was also 70, so he probably knew death was coming at the point. He's like, yeah.
And like a true astronomer, he saw it in the stars.
Oh no, he literally saw the
Astrology.
bad omen in the stars. Was like, oh crap, I need to publish.
Yeah, the astrology thing.
He's just like, man, I should just get this done real quick, guys.
Yeah. I believe he had it arranged to be published on his death.
That's also a possibility, yeah.
Yeah, I believe that was how he set it up, because he was still trying to solve those nasty little problems of gravity, which actually still manages to stump Kepler and Galileo until until in the later half of the 17th century. We've got like another 50 years after Galileo is brought down by the church. Sir Isaac Newton in England performs his work on celestial mechanics, which gets Copernicus into mainstream European society. This is now an idea people can talk about, because Copernicus was not good at making things intelligible for the average reader, even when the average reader is a doctorate level college graduate. It's unintelligible to most people, most people with that level of understanding.
That's an issue that they still have in academia, though, where it's like, why can't you just write this in English?
Yeah.
Because we have to be classist, and we need it to be fancy.
Yeah. So,
Can't let the pores read this.
Yeah. So Newton effectively solves the gravity issue, which is one of the big hamstrings to this theory, makes it popular, and over the course of the rest of the 17th century, heliocentrism becomes the norm for what most average people will believe in throughout non-Catholic Europe. It takes another fucking century before it seeps through the borders and most everyone, even in Catholic Europe, agrees with the theory, and the church just kind of lets geocentrism die.
To be fair, 100 years, given the time frame and the era, really isn't all that long. We talk about it like it is, but you're right in terms of the spread of knowledge, the spread of information, and the fact that it became widely accepted. 100 years is real quick for that kind of dissemination of information.
The printing press really helped with that, too.
The printing press was very effective, and it's also Newton, out of like the big four that we've talked about here with Copernicus, Galileo, Kepler, Newton is the one who is able to just write in a way that can be understood by anyone who reads English. You do not necessarily need a doctoral degree to understand what this man is trying to tell you. It helps, but you don't need it.
Interesting. So Newton's the one who's really the G here, because he figured out the falling problem, and then also was like, you know what? I'm gonna make this intelligible.
Yeah, he's the one who ties the thread of the ideas together and puts it all into a nice bow.
Yeah. Basically, Copernicus is the founder and the father, and Newton is the pinnacle where we sort of get the epiphany of everything's finally figured out from this original ultimately very messy, math-heavy theory to something that is accurate more or less completely and is understandable by the rest of humanity.
And it's been all downhill since.
Well, not necessarily. We got NASA because of this.
Which
How do we
speaking
get NASA again?
Do we want to go into the legacy then about how Copernicus is known as the father of modern astronomy?
Yeah, sure. We can jump into that too. So yeah, Copernicus, that is his title. He is the father of modern astronomy. He's not the father of astronomy. That's a different man. But he is the father of modern astronomy, which is where you do it right with mathematics and not dealing with star signs.
So what you're saying is we have NASA because of Copernicus.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah, his heliocentrism is now basic. Astronomy is heliocentrism. Heliocentrism is astronomy. They are as inseparable as astronomy and astrology were way back in the day.
So the god Helios really got out like a bandit here. Like he
Helios, Apollo, Ra,
Well, you know,
whichever is
we
your
like
favorite.
we like naming things after the Greek gods. You know, let's be honest. These people write in Latin, but they name everything after the Greeks.
Well, the planets are all Latinized names.
True, but with the exception of the Mercury capsules, I think all of the space programs are Greek.
well no
Apollo's technically Greek and Roman.
It was Greek first. Romans
forgetting-
adopted it and incorporated it so well.
you're
Gemini?
forgetting Juno.
Yeah,
Mm.
Juno.
That's a really
Juno
big
program.
one because they
Saturn.
sent Juno to go spy on Jupiter. Like they knew what they were doing.
The
They
Saturn,
knew.
Just like,
the Saturn generation of rockets.
Rockets.
yeah.
And then there's a tie back to our home here in Chicago, where the Copernicus Center was established.
Yep. So yeah, Chicago has a large Polish community in it, and it also has something called the Alder Planetarium. And once upon a time, for Copernicus's 500th birthday, the Polish community in Chicago wanted to get him a birthday gift. So they decided to crowdfund a statue. The problem is, Polish people in Chicago were way more patriotic than they thought. And so they raised far more money than they needed to make the statue of Copernicus, which still sits outside the Adler Planetarium in Chicago. They raised so much more money that in order to manage it, they had to establish the Copernicus Foundation, which in turn bought a movie theater that they then refurbished into the Copernicus Center as a Polish cultural center for housing like stage plays.
That's
That is
cool.
incredible.
I like
they-
that.
And they also bought it because it was one of the first movie theaters built exclusively for talkies.
Oh, that's
Ooh.
cool.
Movies with sound. They have the original theater in the building. They don't use it, but it's there as a historical center.
That's cool.
That's cool.
I like
Surrounded
that.
by
I like that
a bunch of
lot.
Shakespearean stages. It's very nice.
And then I guess to bring everything full circle, and one of the reasons that spawned this whole episode about us talking about Copernicus is the new telescope that is replacing the Hubble, which is the James Webb Deep Space Telescope, which has produced some incredible imagery.
It's wild because especially since what was it? Was it 2020 or 2019 when they had like the clearest picture of a black hole? And it's like now we could get an even clearer picture of like black holes and other faraway space objects.
Yep.
One of the images in question was the cluster of 5 galaxies that we were finally able to disseminate, like the different galaxies among the cluster.
Yeah. And for those of you watching, the Hubble telescope is named for an American astronomer, Edwin Hubble, who was one of the first people to establish that there are things existing outside of the Milky Way galaxy. He established the existence of extragalactic material. So the first telescope that could accurately observe that phenomenon got his name.
Mm-hmm.
As for James Webb, whose telescope is replacing this. James Webb ran NASA.
That's a big one. NASA did a lot of space.
He ran NASA in the 60s. He's basically like the founding head of NASA, more or less.
So he was head of NASA when they landed on the moon?
Yeah, 1961 to 1968.
Wait, moon landing happened in 69.
Yeah, so he didn't quite make it there, but he that was all the foundational groundwork.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
You have to do the research. You have to have the tests. You have to send chimps to space.
They should name the next one after Buzz Aldrin.
Yeah.
No, I don't care about Neil Armstrong. I want to be Buzz Aldrin.
My favorite conspiracy theory is Neil Armstrong's first name and last letter of his name. You put it backwards, it spells out alien.
That's lovely.
Don't bring aliens here. We know what that does.
Yeah, we do not invoke the name of the Allens.
hey.
And one of the fun things too is I think we're wrapping up here is just with the James Webb with James Webb and the Webb telescope. This is the first time we've named one of these things after someone who was not an astronomer. Webb was not an astronomer. He was a director, and he was a he was a director, and he was responsible for putting together the moon landing program. He wasn't in charge when it landed, but he was responsible for setting up that program. And so he gets that honor. And it's the first time we're doing it to someone who wasn't an astronomer like Hubble was. I think there's also one named after Kepler floating around in the sky right now.
I mean, there's also a lot of exoplanets named after Kepler, too.
We like Kepler a lot.
We really do.
We like Kepler, but not the other one.
Well, let's be honest. Galileo was tortured into recanting. Copernicus was largely obscure. Kepler's kind of got that happy medium where he's known exclusively for space.
Kepler's like, space is cool.
But he didn't get the hammer brought down on him. Also, we have a lot of things named after Kepler because Kepler was German, and we outsourced a lot of our science in the early days of NASA.
Yes.
We don't talk about that.
Well, what do you mean? We don't talk about a lot of the atomic engineers' backgrounds? I mean, where would Oppenheimer have come from?
Yep.
Where would any of the NASA space engineers would have come from?
Yeah. Or, Kurt Debus or Werner von Braun.
No.
Thank you.
One of those men was in the SS.
Yeah, there it is. Yep.
You said the quiet part out loud. The United States liked German scientists and pardoned a lot of Nazi scientists for defecting.
Yep.
A lot.
Just to get the leg up on the Soviets.
Which is ironic because then the Soviets built their space program based off of ours using spies.
Yeah, it's amazing how early Cold War espionage works. but
a lot more Nazis than
historical humans on Copernicus, everybody.
On that terrible bombshell, we're gonna wrap up here. If you guys enjoyed the episode, be sure to drop a like down below. Subscribe if you want to listen more. Be sure to rate us on your podcast platform of choice. And Colum, what is on the docket coming up here next?
So on the docket, we have for Historical Humans Reads. I do indeed believe that coming out today is the Reads for Havamal, a Scandinavian etiquette book, followed by the Friday after this airs, a reading from On the Revolutions of the Heavenly Spheres by Nicolaus Copernicus. So we're going to get to hear some of that book that we've been talking a lot about that made this man famous and that really puts him in the, annals of history as a major player.
And then following that, the next podcast episode we're going to have, which will be episode number 18, we're going down to the wonderful state of Texas. Oh, I'm sorry. The Republic of Texas.
Oh, you're not that far back, eh?
Yep. one of the few U.S. states to have formerly been its own nation.
And then not, and became a state.
And we mean
I can't wait to see that one.
Yeah, that'll be a spicy one. So be sure to stay tuned. And thank you guys for listening. We will catch you guys in 2 weeks.
And thank you for having me, guys. This was fun.
Yeah, Aaron, we'll put your link down in the description. So if people want to check out Aaron, what would you like? Your TikTok, your Instagram?
Put my Twitter down there. My Instagram.
Okay.
My Instagram's mostly books that I'm reading. Right now I'm reading The Nesting, which is a thriller novel. So, but yeah, my Twitter's pretty hot. I love it.
All right, so we'll link you down below. Be sure to check Aaron out, and thank you for joining us. We'll catch you guys next time.